The scripture up on the board is basically the proof test for this particular class. Let's read it, and then we'll continue on with our study, do a little review first, and get on with some new material. Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through that which has been made, so that they may be without excuse, so that they are without excuse, rather. And so here we are, looking at the world, because God wants us to look at the world so we can see clearly that he exists. And so whether we are already believers, and we have plenty of evidence in the scriptures to support that there's a God, and the Bible is God's word, and Jesus is the Son of God, there's so much more that we can see too, that God would like us to see. And he says that we can see it clearly. So we've been looking at some things like the things that we can see every day without any kind of assistance like microscopes. We can see the human body is an amazingly wonderful mechanism, if you want to use it just mechanical terms. I mean, it's a living creature, is what we are, but it's also so complicated, so many systems that are involved. We looked briefly at the eye, we looked at the ear, we looked at a number of other things that shows us that it should be obvious to anyone with just a little bit of consideration, something like this couldn't happen by accident. There had to be a designer, there had to be somebody who put sophisticated mechanisms in place to make all life work. Plant life, animal life, human life, everything that exists should be obvious. And we looked at some of the creatures that, the animal kingdom, bombardier beetle with his sophisticated mechanism. It shows again, these things are too complicated for an accidental means to bring them about. Accidental means like evolution. We looked at, what's that fish named again? I'm forgetting. Anyway, that shoots the bugs out of the sky. Again, a mechanism that couldn't happen just by chance. The sea anemone with its complicated dart system, poison darts, how it stuns and then captures and then digests its prey. And just as wonderfully amazing as a giraffe, and its neck on the outside maybe looks pretty easy, not so. Very complicated mechanism that allows it to exist. So we look at all these things, and all we can really say is, "Oh Lord, how many are your works? In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures." And that's obvious. It's obvious just by looking around. But it even becomes more obvious when you look further and when you look down in on the microscopic level, which we started doing last week, and see that really on the microscopic molecular level, things are just as amazing and complicated, if not more so, than on the macro level, like we are sitting around here looking at each other and realizing we couldn't be accidents. Well, it's the same thing is true with the things on that molecular level. As we zoom in on something like this ear, and we get closer and closer, and we use some of the mechanisms that we have today to be able to see down, not just on the skin level, like we might be able to do with a magnifying glass. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, but we get down to this cellular level. All of our parts of our body, every tissue, brain, skin, heart, lung, has cells. And these cells are amazingly complicated factories. Now Darwin, this is his theory that people are throwing around since he came along back in the mid-19th century. He didn't know what a cell really was. He just thought, I'm going to skip through this a little bit. He had a microscope look like that. His power was 800 times magnification. All he saw was a piece of little jelly down there. And that's as complicated as he knew things to be. Today, it's completely different. We have these amazing machines that for some reason, God arranged. He allowed us to develop a technology where we can magnify things now, not 800 times, but 50 million times. So what we see now, and here just at a couple thousand magnification, cell isn't just a little glob of jelly. It's a sophisticated collection of complicated mechanisms that have distinct and wonderful properties and distinct and wonderful jobs that they need to do. And so we use this little graphic we brought up last week, which is just an animation that shows that really a cell, all of our cells, which we have about 50 trillion of them in our body, have some of the very same features. Even though these cells are different, they all have these central features that we were talking about in this class. And they are amazingly complicated mechanisms. Factories, yes, but also much more than that. They do different work in the body that is necessary for our survival. We read last week Bruce Albert's molecular biologist in his production, The Cell as a Collection of Protein Machines, Preparing the Next Generation of Molecular Biologists. He says, we have always underestimated the cells. The entire cell can be viewed as a factory that contains an elaborate network of interlocking assembly lines, each which is composed of a set of large protein machines. Okay, well that's what we're going to be looking at, these protein machines that are just as amazing to see as some of the creatures that we see walking around outside when you go outside this afternoon and watch a bird fly or a slug crawl on the ground. Slugs are amazing creatures. They get a bad rap, but they're amazing creatures actually. Now, this type of study, since it was possible in the early 20th century, convinced a man who was the strongest, adamant, respected in his field, atheist philosopher, Antony Flew. And he said, after looking and considering for a number of years, he changed his mind. And he said, biologist investigation of DNA has shown by the almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangements which are needed to produce life that intelligence must have been involved. He cracked. He'd held up for all his life, some 80 years. Well, he probably wasn't teaching much when he was a kid, but some 50, 60 years that we all evolved. It's all an accident. But when he began to see some of this evidence, he changed his mind and came out publicly, and most of the renowned publications in the world told everybody what he thought. I can't believe anymore that there's no intelligence behind life. So we looked here, took quickly and see that, okay, the cell is an amazing organism. And we're going to look at some of these machines. It has workers, it has power plants, it has roads, it has trucks and factories and garbage depots, recycling plants, police station, control center, data center. They all have their different little names that you might not recognize over there. But we looked at those in brief and saw that the cell is completely organized in such a way that's too amazing to even consider that it happened by accident. Okay, we started looking at some of these cellular machines, the cellular power plants. And since we've got, I think, the teen class in here that Terry's out of town, so this week they're sitting in here. I'm going to show a little bit of what we showed last week so they can see some of these things that they might have missed out on. We've got the cellular power plants. You've got trillions of them in your body. A microscopic machine that supplies most of the energy needed for many various mechanisms that operates in the cell. And it's called Atp Synthase, and the reason is because it synthesizes this power molecule, this energy molecule that everything that needs to have a bit of energy in the body, which is everything that works, they need to have this energy. And so this is the machine that produces that. Here's an electron microscope of a couple of them next to each other, usually in pairs or in groups. And it's an amazing machine. You can't call it anything else. It works just like a generator that man has made. So looking here at a kind of a brief version of this video we showed last week, let's see if let me go back and hit that differently.
These protons drive a rotation of the turbine within ATP synthase, resulting in the synthesis of ATP. Like all generators, ATP synthase consists of two separate motors coupled together. Within the membrane, we have the FO motor, named after the binding of antibiotic oligomycin, and at the top we have the F1 motor from factor 1. These protons drive a rotation of the turbine within ATP synthase,
Okay, I'm going to stop it there and just look at that right there. That is a generator. You've got them in your cars. We have them in a number of different machines that we have that need power. We have generators. That's what that is. The cell, the body needs energy. We eat food that's transferred into proteins in this particular case, and that runs this generator. And it generates the energy molecule that everything needs to use. It is a mechanical wonder. And again, you have multi-trillions of them in your body. It's just another example of something that's so complicated, it couldn't happen by accident. Too many parts, too much sophistication. Even if you look at the fact of the way it would have to somehow come together over time, what part would evolve first, it would be useless until the second or third or fourth part came around. Evolution can't explain it, only design can. Only God could make something like this. And again, I'll say again, the reason it's so bumpy looking there isn't because it couldn't be sleeker, but because those little bumps you're seeing are actual atoms. This is as small as matter gets. These machines are as small as they could really be in our present physical universe, and God has made them that small. And they function for the purpose He has made for them in the body. So there's one example of this, a molecular machine that couldn't happen and come around by accident. Okay, moving on here. Well, I make an example here. There's no much difference in the logic here about the bombardier beetle that has a sophisticated mechanism that we can basically see with the naked eye. And here we go down to something that is minuscule and molecular, and it also tells us the same thing. God is its designer. Okay, going on here. We started looking at the bacteria flagellum. Asked you the question, are bacteria good or bad? You said both. Yeah, there's harmful bacteria and there's beneficial bacteria. So let's just look at it this time as being a beneficial bacteria. Here's a bacteria flagellum is a molecular propeller and motor that many bacteria use to drive them around wherever they want to go. This is what they use. This microscopic machine consists of a rotary motor and a whip-like propeller that rotates at a speed of about 20,000 RPM, which is pretty quick as motors go. Here's a drawing of it, a schematic, a graphic of it, and you might think the artist is kind of using a little bit of artist's leeway or freedom there, but not so, because here's an electron microscopic picture of it. It's a real picture using an electron microscope showing the parts of this motor on this molecular level, as small as it really can get. And it's no different than the motors that we make today, the electric motors that we make today. Let's look, let's see, I made a point here though, the components of the motor are made up of proteins instead of metal rings or brass bushings and ball bearings like our electric motors are. Their design and function are identical to the man-made rotary motors, which all, of course, needed to be designed and constructed before we could use them in our everyday world. No different with this one. Okay, we're going to look at a little video here that shows bacteria swimming around. And they have these little bacteria flagellum motors as they swim around. Some of these bacteria, the first few, this is an actual microscopic picture, have just one, and some have 3 of them, which is the second one you'll see come on here. And then we'll go to a graphical representation of what this motor really looks like and a little bit how it's constructed on this level. And it really is something that can show each of us it's so sophisticated that there's only one answer to how it got into existence. Okay, and this one actually doesn't have any sound, I think, so I can talk. Hey. So here they are. These bacteria are swimming around in your body. Don't know if these are good or beneficial bacteria or harmful bacteria. These guys have the one tail to swim around. These have 3. Some have as much as 10, I think, of these little bacteria flagellum that carry them around doing their jobs. Some of these have become harmful. Most of those ones are beneficial. And now we have an animation coming in. And I'll kind of just talk us through it of what these things look like on that molecular level. So you got the filament, that's that little thing that spins around, just like a propeller can, and then the hook, necessary part for it to actually make it motive. And we're looking down in what's called the basal body. So here's the motor part. And it, just like motors that we might make, has a rod that comes through that turns, has rings, these little things talking about how it's attached to the cell membrane. I mean, I have to do all I can to think this is something that's not man-made. Have a stator, that's the part that stays. Those of you that are in any kind of mechanics know a stator is the part that the rotor turns within, and that's how this motor works. Okay, I'm gonna switch to the next video because I broke this up into two for a reason. Now we're gonna look at how the rest of this machine comes about. And what's neat about this is not just that this machine itself is so amazingly complicated and sophisticated, the way it's made. It takes, from this point on anyway, it takes a number of molecular tools called caps in this video to help it be constructed. And so we look from here, and here comes the rod, and that's a rod tool. The rod cap on top builds this rod up through the cell membrane. Then these rings that attach it to the cell membrane, like bushings in a motor, the L ring and the P ring, okay, they are produced. Another cap comes along, the hook cap, a tool to construct the hook part of this machine. That disassociates when the hook's done, and that junction proteins are produced, that filament for connecting to the, and then another tool comes along, another cap, to build the rest of this motor. And out it goes, and we're looking at this at about the rate they're actually built. It takes a little bit of time to build these. On the molecular level. A lot of things go a lot faster than some of the videos we show, but some of them go about this speed, and this one does. And so here we are, bacteria, go do your job. How can evolution explain a motor like that? It simply can't. It's too complicated. It's too involved. It just can't come together a part at a time. Even if evolution could produce one protein that would look like part of a stator, what good is one protein out of a part of a stator if you don't have a rotor or a shaft or a hook or a filament that are evolving at the same time? And remember, evolution doesn't think ahead. It's accidental mutations, and they have to be useful in order for them to be preserved. Can't be separate parts of a machine that aren't assembled, aren't useful. Sorry, it doesn't happen. So again, just like any of the biological life you can look at and just see, and you can spend days and days looking, go on YouTube and just go look at the Earth's creatures or whatever, just amazing creatures that have sophisticated mechanisms. But on this level too, that microscopic level, these are amazing mechanisms that show how wonderful God's design is. This is a highly efficient motor and propulsion system. Praise God that He made something like this. Okay, strong evidence to show that God made things and chance could not. Okay, not a lot of comments this morning, that's fine. If you got one, raise them up. Again, we're just looking at examples here, so I'm not making a lot of statements other than just some examples to show what God wants us to see, I believe, so clearly, like in Romans 20. This is just, I mean, as evolution gets more and more popular, God opens up technology and shows you, look, no, you guys are foolish to imagine that these kinds of things could happen by chance. Okay, next one. Yes, sir.
So, my major was biochemistry and zoology.
Yeah.
And so they had a lot of great stuff. We had a microscope that went up to 10,000 times, and
Yeah.
they didn't know some of this stuff. They couldn't get microscopes that were powerful enough to see a single atom, which they now had. They said atoms could never be seen.
Yeah.
Even then, though, biological systems were incredibly sophisticated. We knew that. And there have been scientists like Dr. Anthony Flew that have seen it, and the more that came out, as you said, the more evolution attacks Christianity, the more information God gives us through modern science. And some have said, look, it's impossible. Like Dr. Anthony Flew, he said, it is impossible for this to have occurred without a creator. So it's not being wasted on everybody. I don't understand why all can't just say, God is glorious. This is no mistake. But I'm blown away. And this was my major, and I'm a believer, and still, just incredible stuff. Thank you, Bill. Blows
me away all the time. Really does. I look for new machines that come along. There's 20,000 protein machines, different protein. There's trillions and trillions of protein machines in your body. Every cell has millions of them. But different ones that they discover or find out that they didn't know existed, or that work differently than they thought. So it's an exciting science to me. I think young people, consider a career in molecular biology. It is amazing what you'll see and what you'll learn and what you'll discover as time goes on. Thanks, Mike. Okay, next molecular machine, a kinesin. And I should have put down here kinesin and adenine, which is similar to kinesin. And what they are these little guys. They have the job of transporting collections of proteins to various sites where they're needed in the cell. Now this kinesin wins the cuteness award. It's obvious, I think it does when you see how it works. It's a cute little guy. But it's really a molecular machine with a function, and it carries it out effectively. So a couple of videos on this, and I should be naming the resource that I'm getting this from. My son-in-law said that's how you need to do it when you're doing something and you're using somebody else's material, even though it's a short part of it. So this is from the Inner Life of the Cell, Harvard University.
Microtubules provide tracks along which membrane-bound vesicles travel to and from the plasma membrane. The directional movement of these cargo vesicles is due to a family of motor proteins linking vesicles and microtubules.
That's a pretty short video. Sorry about the sound. That was a low sound on that one. But what these guys do is they have these big, huge vesicles of proteins that have been made. We're going to show how some of these proteins are made by these different machines in a minute. And maybe I'm doing some of this backwards. But they have these huge vesicles, these huge containers, and they drag them physically along these microtubules. I told you about the roads in the cell. There are roads that are constructed right at the right time for these guys to come across. You try that. You want to go somewhere out in the wilderness? See if you can have somebody build you a road right when you need it. The cell does that, builds its own roads right when they're needed. And these guys travel along doing their job, taking these proteins where they're needed in the cell to do their job, to do their work. Another video. This one's a bit longer, and it'll be about 3 minutes. So, and let me explain this. The first part of it, the first 30 seconds of it, shows an actual microscopic view of a cell dividing. And then we get into, you'll see when it transfers into an animation of what all this happens. And again, it can't happen. I mean, we just think, oh, the cell divides. Oh, okay. Next point. No, the cell dividing is an amazing wonder. And it's not something that just happens unknown in a slipshod way. We know how it works, or most of it these days, and it relies on these little molecular machines to do the job. So let's look at this and we'll make some comments. Maybe I'll pause at a time or two, who knows.
The process of dividing a cell takes around an hour in mammals, so this footage is from a time lapse. You can see how the chromosomes line up on the equator of the cell. Now when everything is right, they are pulled apart into the two new daughter cells, each one containing an identical copy of DNA. Now, as simple as this looks, the process is incredibly complicated and requires even more fascinating molecular machines to accomplish it. So let's look at a single chromosome.
So we're looking at one chromosome. Everybody has 23 pairs of chromosomes, and in order for a cell to divide, those chromosomes have to duplicate. And cells need to divide because old cells die, you need new cells all the time. This happens constantly by the millions in your body. Old, worn out cells being replaced by new cells. Or in growth, cells reproducing so that a person or an animal can grow to its full extent. So here we're going to look at this chromosome and what happens and as it gets ready to divide.
One chromosome consists of two sausage-shaped chromatids containing the identical copies of DNA made earlier. Each chromatid is attached to microtubule fibers, which guide and help align them in the correct position. The microtubules are connected to the chromatid at the kinetochore, here colored red. The kinetochore consists of hundreds of different proteins working together to achieve multiple objectives. In fact, it's one of the most sophisticated molecular mechanisms inside your body. The kinetochore is central to the successful separation of the chromatids. It creates a dynamic connection between the chromosome and the microtubules. For a reason no one's yet been able to figure out, the microtubules are constantly being built at one end and deconstructed at the other. While the chromosome is still getting ready, the kinetochore sends out a chemical stop signal to the rest of the cell, shown here by the red molecules, basically saying this chromosome is not yet ready to divide. The kinetochore also mechanically senses tension. When the tension is just right and the position and attachment are correct, all the proteins get ready, shown here by turning green. At this point, the stop signal broadcasting system is not switched off. Instead, it is literally carried away from the kinetochore down the microtubules by a dynein motor. That's the walking guy. This is really what it looks like. It has long legs so it can avoid obstacles and step over the kinesins, molecular motors that walk in the opposite direction.
Personally, I'm astounded by these tiny molecular machines, how they're able to routinely and faithfully execute their functions billions of times over inside your body at this exact instant.
Amen. I'm astounded. I'm amazed. Cellular functions aren't simple little jelly things happening. They happen, cells divide in a sophisticated, and we've just looked at just a part of the complicated process of how chromosomes separate, and just part of that complicated process. It depends upon a multitude of these little machines pulling things along, just like you would in our world. If you need to get something done on a job site, you better have somebody who can wheel the wheelbarrow and take the load from here to there so you can build your building. No different, except this is on the atomic level, the molecular level. This happens. And to me, it's amazing. And the reason we're looking at it isn't just to be entertained, even though it may be a little entertaining, it's because it shows something that helps us see how clear the answer that God made this kind of mechanism. He made wonderful, amazing creatures that we can see out our window every day. He made wonderful, amazing creatures on a molecular level we can't see typically without help of technology. Andrew.
One thing I find interesting in this is that, you zoom down, you magnify, you get so close in here and you see these they almost look like creatures, but they're not creatures. No. They're not animals.
They don't have minds.
They're the best analogy is that they're robots.
Yeah.
They're programmed with an incredibly complex code to do the job that they're built to do, and
yes.
But they're organic. They're not made with metal or anything like that. Mm-hmm. They're made. The cell, when it's created, creates the power plant, the little trucks that you're showing here and all of that. And it does it because of the DNA coding that's built into it.
Yes.
It's just incredible.
Yeah, I think so too. And we'll look at DNA in just a little while. If we get to it, I don't know if we will this morning. But it's because of the information that's in the cell. It's programmed. These are like little robots. Exactly, that's the best way to describe. Mechanisms, machines that are robots that run around doing their jobs, just like we're starting to get to be able to do on everyday life, where we have robots doing things. And if you go down to an Amazon facility, a fulfillment center, you know, you'll see these little machines running around carrying these big shelf units from here to there. How do they know where to go? They've been programmed. The body has been taught, instructed, programmed by God to work a certain way at such a level that's almost impossible to imagine. So yeah, agree with you on that, Andrew. Appreciate that. Okay, moving ahead. Well, let's see, the whole Kinesin transport system, along with the way it's powered, is irreducibly complex. It's so amazing. Anybody want to guess how this little guy actually is able to walk the way he does? Where's he get his energy? Somebody give me a guess. We talked about it from the power plant. Little ATP molecules come out and bind to this thing as it walks along, and it's able to walk and pull its load. When this load gets too tough and the stricture of the cell gets too combined and it stops, it can't pull anymore, more kinesins come along and more dyneins come along until it can actually get the thing to where it goes. Again, amazing creation. When I use the word creature, I mean creation. Yeah, these aren't thinking creatures, but they are God's creation that he made and designed for life to exist in everything that's living. Plants, too, have their own system that's similar to this, but a little different. Okay, we got some time to head out. Any more comments at this time? Let's look, I forgot the example. We're comparing to the macular world like this sea anemone that has a complicated mechanism. It's no different than that in principle. These are complicated, sophisticated mechanisms, and they can't happen by chance. They're too complex to happen a step at a time. Yes, Marilyn.
I'm really enjoying this because we kind of live in America right now. It's a throwaway society. And I think with now the second generation of latchkey kids and everybody's going, what's going on? Why is it this way? Well, a lot of kids raise themselves. This shows how valuable we are to God, how much it might have took him 6 days, which he's amazing in 6 days, but this is like $1 million miracle or more, you know, if you're going to put a price on it. So it just amazes me that how wonderful God is and how much value he's put on us as human beings that he would want to save us.
Amen. That's a great way to look at it. Look at the work that God did to make us. It only took 1 day for him to make us. Right? Okay. Which again makes it even, I mean, come on, 1 day or 6 days. And he made all this. And all its complexity. And we're looking at just such an infinitesimal small part of it during our class. There's so much more of it. If you want to see, go and just research it. Just research it if you want to learn more. Okay, next machine here we've got to look at. Well, before a cell can divide, we saw that whole process, right? It must duplicate all of its DNA. And we didn't look at that part. Now, to duplicate its DNA, it uses a couple of complicated mechanisms to do this process, and we're going to see kind of how this works. We're able to do that for over the last 20 years. I think we've been able to view that through these sophisticated microscopes and then reproduce graphics that just demonstrate it. So first of all, it needs helicase, one of the most complicated molecular proteins or machines in the body. Its job is to separate double-stranded DNA into single strands, allowing each strand to be copied. Now, DNA is that wound-up piece of stuff that you've seen probably different places. It has all the information for the cell. It can be in a very compact form, as we'll see in just a bit, or it can be in one that's laid out, open, ready to be reproduced. And so this machine is one of the mechanisms that helps unwind this DNA so it can be produced. Along with another machine, these two work together, called the Ribosome. And that's, again, a sophisticated structure here that we'll be seeing. And what it does, the Ribosome, after the strand is separated into two strands, it makes an exact copy of each DNA molecule, which is what we need if we want to duplicate cells. We need duplicated DNA. Got to send that information along to the little daughter cells or sister cells or whatever you want to call it. So let's look at a little, and I should have said before that the previous video was from Veritasium, and so is this one, illustrating this process of duplicating DNA.
Copying DNA is one of the first steps in cell division. Here, the two strands of DNA are being unwound and separated by the tiny blue molecular machine called helicase. Helicase literally spins as fast as a jet engine.
Let me stop that. He doesn't mention the ribosome here, though it's the part that's not blue. Sorry about that. I meant to say that before. Let me go. I can't go back. Okay. So the blue part, that's the helicase. The rest of it's the ribosome. He just said that the blue part spins as fast as a jet engine.
The strand of DNA on the right has its complementary strand assembled continuously, but the other strand is more complicated because it runs in the opposite direction. So it must be looped out with its complementary strand assembled in reverse, section by section. At the end of this process, you have two identical DNA molecules.
I'm going to play that one more time. It's, to me, so amazing. You look at it, just watch what it does. Here you've got these mechanisms coming in and pulling out and reproducing and copying, and it doesn't even show you part of this process because it's about where it gets the material to produce the second DNA. That's a different part of the process.
Copying DNA is one of the first steps in cell division. Here, the two strands of DNA are being unwound and separated by the tiny blue molecular machine called helicase. Helicase literally spins as fast as a jet engine. The strand of DNA on the right has its complementary strand assembled continuously, but the other strand is more complicated because it runs in the opposite direction. So it must be looped out with its complementary strand assembled in reverse, section by section. At the end of this process, you have two identical DNA molecules.
Okay, and then the cell can split like we showed last time. Again, I maybe should be having these in different order, but this is how I've done it. Okay. Helicase and the ribosome are irreducibly complex and amazing mechanical systems that are needed and are used in the cell continually to allow us to reproduce and continue living. Okay, what do we got? I think we got one or two more here. The ribosome, that's an amazing mechanism. This is the apparatus that manufactures proteins. Now, I know when you think of proteins, you think of what I'm eating today for lunch, right? And that's a good place to start. I mean, maybe you'll have a hamburger. I might have a McDonald's, I like the breakfast burritos there. I may have one of those. And they have different components in those particular things that we eat that have proteins. Proteins are important for the body to function. What happens when we eat them, the body breaks them down into things called amino acids, which are basic there's 20 different amino acids, and they're not very complicated. They have maybe 4 to 10 components in them, atoms in them, and then the body takes the protein you're eating and builds its own machines it needs to, like the ones we've already seen, to do the kinds of work it needs to do. And so this particular thing called a ribosome, again, it looks bumpy because you're seeing the atoms. It's that small. What it does, it links amino acids together precisely in the way required to build the protein machines, which are needed to do all the work in the cell. We've already looked at a few protein machines, and a ton of other ones we won't take the time to look at. But let's just watch and see how this is done. This is no audio with this, so let me explain to you first of all that RNA strand that has the code we need, or the DNA has the code, an RNA strand, which is the part that's looping through the bottom here, and it's continually going through. It's like a ticker tape going, or a computer tape going through. It reads off to the ribosome what particular amino acid it needs next. And then something called tRNA, these little things bring in the exact right amino acid and it builds a protein. So let's watch and see that happen. So there that's going through. You've got these mechanisms coming in to this machine called tRNA. It carry a little amino acid and it starts building this protein out the backside. This is a mechanical function. This is like any machine that we would have today that might build something. This is how this machine works. It builds this protein, it keeps building it and building it. Proteins can be huge. Then a special termination mechanism comes along at the right time and says, okay, it's all done. Protein goes off, folds itself sometimes into the right shape for the job it needs, or sometimes it goes to a mechanism that helps to fold it because it can be so complicated, it can't fold itself. We don't have time, we're not going to take the time to go look at that mechanism. There are just too many to look at. So again, a ribosome. This video was by MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology. I need to be given the credits here. It's a mechanical wonder. You have trillions of these in your body reproducing, making proteins continually, exactly as it's being told by the DNA program. And again, it's an example of a irreducibly complex, if people don't know why I have a mousetrap on there if you haven't been here, because that's one of the simple mechanisms we can understand easily and know that you can't make a mousetrap if you only have one piece for 1,000,000 years, and then you get another piece for 1,000,000 years, and then you get the third piece, because it has to have all the components. These machines are the same. The little tRNAs that are coming in with those amino acids wouldn't have any job to do if the ribosome wouldn't have been built first, or at least at the same time, and that just simply isn't going to happen. Okay, what do we got? 1017. I think we're gonna wait on the spliceosome, which is perhaps one of the most complicated molecular machines there are. This thing is amazing. We'll wait for next week and show this last one that I've got to show. And there's, like I say, lots more. If you're really interested and you want to look into it, the main point that we're looking at here is that the world is full of those who are proclaiming there is no God. We don't need God. We don't need God because we have an understanding, we're that bright, that things could come about by accident through mutation and natural selection. Now, it's so easy to say that, and a lot of people obviously believe that. But when you get down and look at the particulars and see, really, is there any way these things could have come about a piece at a time over millions of years? The obvious answer is no, it's not. I'm not ashamed to say it out loud. No way, couldn't happen. Only a fool thinks there is no God, and for a good reason. Because of all these things that we can see happening in our body and in nature. Nature, I don't even like the word nature, I kind of fell out of favor with the word nature. I like to say in creation, because nature implies something that it all happened naturally. Well, it didn't happen naturally. It happened creatively, whatever that adverb is, creatively, okay? It did, it had to. And I'd love to hear any arguments that would show or even suggest otherwise, how these particular things could happen. Okay, we're coming into the end of our time here. We'll get on to look at the spliceosome. We'll mention a few other protein machines among the thousands of them that there are. And I hope you're as blown away as I am. And this information is ready you can download it anytime off our website or off of, and it doesn't even have to be in this class form. You can just take the slides and reference to them and go to these different examples and show them to somebody, if you want to. So thank you for your presence today and for your attention and your participation. Take a break for about 10 minutes and we'll get back to our assembly worship time.